She was 65, exhausted, diabetic, and ready to give up, until one simple shift changed everything. What if everything you believed about aging and disease was wrong? At 65, Mary was battling fatigue, insulin shots, and fear, until she discovered a healing path no doctor ever offered. In just months, her blood sugar normalized, her energy soared, and her hope returned. Her journey isn't a miracle, it's a message, and you need to hear it. If you've ever felt like it's too late, too broken, or too far gone to turn your life around, let Mary's story breathe hope into your soul. Her courage became her cure. And if she could rise from the weight of disease at 65, so can you. Subscribe now, not just for stories, but for transformation. Because healing is real, and it starts with belief. Yours. Mary stopped waiting for someone to save her. She realized the first step wasn't medication, it was mindset. It was a quiet, powerful awakening that happened not in a doctor's office, but in the silence of her own thoughts. For years, she had listened to the same narrative. You're getting older. It's just part of aging. Take your meds. Accept the decline. But something in her spirit rebelled against that voice. She knew there had to be another way, even if no one around her could see it. She decided to stop outsourcing her healing to a system that only managed symptoms. She stopped asking for rescue and started reclaiming her power. In that moment of radical decision, Mary did something most people never do. She took full responsibility for her health, not in a way that blamed herself, but in a way that awakened a deeper truth. If her body had created this imbalance, then her body could also restore balance. She began reading books, watching documentaries, listening to nutritionists, functional medicine doctors, and holistic healers. She didn't chase quick fixes, she searched for truth. She wanted to understand what her body was trying to say beneath the symptoms. She discovered that type 2 diabetes wasn't just about sugar. It was about inflammation, insulin resistance, chronic stress, toxic food, and emotional patterns. And more than anything, it was about disconnection. Disconnection from the body, from nature, from joy, from movement, and from the sacred rhythm of life. She saw clearly that she had been eating out of habit, not hunger, surviving on packaged foods that numbed her pain, but never nourished her cells. That's when she made a choice that would change her life. She stopped eating like she was dying and started eating like she was healing. She stood in her kitchen one afternoon, opened her pantry, and began removing the poisons. The sugary cereals, the canned soups loaded with sodium, the shelf-stable snacks filled with unpronounceable chemicals. It was more than a clean-out. It was a ceremony of rebirth. Every item she discarded felt like an act of liberation. She was clearing space not just in her kitchen, but in her life. She started visiting her local farmer's market every Saturday morning. At first, it felt unfamiliar. The colors of the produce seemed brighter than she remembered, as if her eyes were waking up. She picked kale, spinach, avocados, fresh berries, and turmeric roots. She asked the farmers questions. She learned about the soil, the seasons, the nutrients in each leaf. She was no longer just buying food. She was receiving life. And with each mindful choice, she built a new relationship with nourishment. Her meals transformed. Breakfast was no longer toast and jam, but a vibrant smoothie of kale, blueberries, chia seeds, almond milk, and cinnamon. Lunch became a bowl of lentils, roasted sweet potatoes, and leafy greens dressed with olive oil and lemon. Dinner was a simple salmon fillet baked with garlic, ginger, and turmeric, paired with sautéed broccoli and wild rice. She didn't follow a fad diet. She followed intuition. She began to listen to her body, and her body started whispering back. The Most powerful shift was that Mary no longer viewed food as punishment or a set of restrictions. She saw it as sacred medicine. Every meal became a quiet prayer of restoration. Every bite was a message. You are worthy of healing. You are worthy of love. You are worthy of life. That mindset was everything. Because no matter how many healthy foods she consumed, if her thoughts were toxic, the healing couldn't fully take root. So she changed her inner dialogue too. She began speaking to herself the way a mother speaks to a child in pain. Gently, patiently, lovingly. When cravings came, she didn't shame herself. She got curious. Why do I want this? What am I really hungry for? Often the answer wasn't sugar. It was comfort, safety, peace. And instead of reaching for cookies, she reached for a journal, a walk in the sun, a moment of deep breathing. She began feeding her soul the things it had been missing for decades. There were hard days. Days when her blood sugar fluctuated. When old habits whispered promises of ease. When fatigue made her question everything. But each time she reminded herself, you are not on a diet. You are on a mission. This is not deprivation. This is devotion. That shift in language made all the difference. Healing became a sacred act of self-respect, and as the weeks passed, something beautiful happened. Her energy returned, not as a sudden burst but like a sunrise, steady, warm, undeniable. She began waking up before her alarm with a lightness she hadn't felt in years. Her digestion improved, her skin glowed, her sleep deepened, and most importantly, her blood sugar began to normalize. Her doctor was stunned. "What are you doing differently?" he asked. Mary just smiled and said, "I started listening to my body." But this transformation wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. Mary realized that her body was never her enemy. It was her teacher. Every symptom had been a cry for connection. And now, through every conscious meal and every gentle thought, she was answering that cry. She felt a new sense of reverence for her organs, her cells, her breath. She even began blessing her food before eating it, not out of religion, but out of deep gratitude. The act of chewing became mindful. No screens, no rushing, just presence. She learned that digestion begins in the mind, and that slowing down wasn't laziness, it was wisdom. Her kitchen became her sanctuary, filled with the scents of garlic, herbs, and healing spices. Her blender became her sacred tool. Her grocery list turned into a ritual of self-love. Friends began noticing. They asked, "What's your secret?" She replied, "It's not a secret, it's a decision. A decision to stop numbing, a decision to start nurturing, a decision to believe that the body is always trying to heal, if we would only get out of its way." And Mary knew this truth deeply. Healing is not about perfection. She didn't become a health monk. She still enjoyed the occasional piece of dark chocolate or a warm cup of coffee. But everything was done with awareness, not addiction. She didn't need to count every calorie or fear every indulgence, because she had built a foundation of trust. Her body trusted her now, and she trusted her body. That trust grew into confidence, and that confidence awakened a mission. Mary began sharing her journey with other women in her community. She hosted small gatherings at her home, where she cooked, shared recipes, and spoke about reclaiming health at any age. She wanted every woman to know, you are not too old, you are not too far gone, your body is not broken, it's waiting for you to believe in it again. She started keeping a journal titled Healing Notes. Every day she wrote one thing she was proud of, one thing she was grateful for, and one thing she learned. It was a small practice, but over time, it rewired her brain. She no longer looked at healing as a mountain to climb, but as a path to walk one step, one breath, one bite at a time. Mary had reversed her type 2 diabetes, but more importantly, she had reversed a lifetime of disempowerment. She became her own advocate, her own healer, her own light. And the light she discovered wasn't just for her, it was for others. Because when one woman rises in her power, she becomes a mirror for what's possible in everyone else. If Mary's story teaches us anything, it's this. Healing doesn't come from waiting. It comes from waking up. Waking up to the wisdom of the body. Waking up to the power of choice. Waking up to the truth that we are not victims. We are vessels of transformation. Mary's journey wasn't easy, but it was real. And that reality is available to anyone bold enough to believe. So if you're listening to this wondering if your body can heal, if your energy can return, if your numbers can normalize, if your joy can come back, the answer is yes. Not through magic, but through momentum. Not through pills, but through presence. Not through fear, but through faith. Faith in food. Faith in movement. Faith in the quiet intelligence that lives inside you, waiting for your attention. You are not broken. You are becoming. Let every meal you choose with love be a step toward your rebirth. Let every healthy bite be a declaration. I am not giving up on me. Because just like Mary, you can take radical ownership of your health. You can choose to live, to thrive, to rise, at any age, in any season. It starts with one powerful decision, to believe that healing is not only possible, it is your birthright. She rewired her daily routine for healing. She didn't do it overnight. There was no dramatic, cinematic moment where everything changed, all at once. No one was watching and no one gave her applause. But she made a choice, quietly, fiercely, to live as if healing was not only possible but inevitable. She stopped organizing her days around her diagnosis and started shaping her hours around her recovery. This wasn't about fixing a broken system. It was about remembering a truth her body had been whispering for decades. I want to be whole. I want to be well. Help me, and I will meet you halfway. Her mornings used to begin with grogginess and dread, often accompanied by the spike of anxiety that came from checking her blood sugar before her feet even touched the floor. But she made a new promise to herself. My days will begin with peace, not panic. So she started waking up 15 minutes earlier, not to rush into a to-do list, but to reconnect with herself. She slipped on her walking shoes, wrapped a light sweater around her shoulders, and stepped outside. There was something sacred about those first moments of dawn, the way the world hadn't fully woken up yet, the way her breath met the cool morning air. It wasn't exercise in the traditional sense, it was alignment. She walked slowly, intentionally. She didn't track steps or count calories. She simply moved, listening to the rhythm of her breath, the rustling of trees, the subtle song of birds. Her mind, often noisy with worries and deadlines, softened into stillness. With each step, she felt a quiet miracle unfolding. Her body wasn't just moving, it was releasing. Releasing fear, releasing tension, releasing the invisible grip of years spent in fight or flight mode. Her walking became a meditation, not a means to an end. She wasn't walking to fix her blood sugar. She was walking to feel alive again. After her walk, she sat in stillness for 5 minutes. No phone, no news. Just her, the sun on her face, and the sound of her own breathing. She inhaled deeply, counting to 5. She held it for another 5, then released it slowly, fully, completely. She had read somewhere that deep breathing could lower cortisol and improve insulin sensitivity. But this wasn't about numbers, it was about nourishment. With each breath, she imagined flooding her cells with oxygen, light, and calm. She wasn't just managing her health, she was building a relationship with her nervous system. She was letting it know, "You're safe now. We're okay." She made sunlight a non-negotiable part of her healing. Even on cloudy days, she stepped outside and lifted her face to the sky. Morning light, she learned, helps reset the circadian rhythm, improves mitochondrial function, and boosts vitamin D levels. But for her, it was more than biology. It was a blessing. She let the light touch her skin and imagined it healing her on a cellular level. Not burning, not blinding, just gently reminding her that nature was still here, still generous, still willing to help if she was willing to receive. After her walk and breathwork, she began a simple but powerful ritual. She placed her hands on her heart and whispered 3 affirmations. I am healing. I am strong. I am enough. These weren't affirmations to impress anyone else. They were for the younger version of herself, the girl who had been told her body was the enemy, the woman who had been defined by lab results, the soul that had been overlooked in the hustle to survive. These affirmations were her way of saying, I see you, I love you, I've got you now. Her morning meal changed too, not just what she ate, but how she ate. She slowed down. She sat at the table. She lit a candle. She gave thanks. No more eating over the sink or in front of the TV. No more rushed bites between emails. Her breakfast became a sacred act of self-respect. Sometimes it was a bowl of steel-cut, oats with cinnamon and blueberries. Other times it was sautéed greens with poached eggs and avocado. She stopped labeling food as good or bad, and instead asked one simple question: does this feed my healing or my habits? And over time, that single question reshaped her entire relationship with nourishment. She noticed that when she created rhythm in her morning, her blood sugar responded, not with wild swings, but with quiet stability. She wasn't depriving herself. She wasn't forcing her body to obey. She was listening, honoring, aligning. Her numbers improved, but more importantly, her trust deepened. She started to feel like her body wasn't a battleground anymore. It was a partner, a friend, a wise teacher with a language of its own, and she was finally learning how to speak it. The ripple effect of those mornings touched every part of her life. She found herself more patient in traffic, more present with loved ones, more attuned to joy. She began noticing the little things, a butterfly landing on a flower, the way her tea steamed in the morning light, the sound of laughter drifting in from a neighbor's porch. These weren't distractions from her healing journey. They were her healing journey. Because healing isn't just about lab reports and diagnoses. It's about returning to life with open eyes and a grateful heart. Mid-morning, instead of caffeine, she sipped on warm lemon water or ginger tea. She took breaks to stretch, to breathe, to step outside and feel the ground beneath her feet. She stopped viewing productivity as a measure of worth and started asking, what does my body need right now? Sometimes the answer was movement. Sometimes it was rest. She honored both. And in doing so, she discovered a rhythm that wasn't frantic but flowing. Her energy came not from pushing harder, but from living softer. In the afternoon, she made time for reflection. Just 10 minutes with a journal and a quiet space. She wrote down what she had noticed in her body that day. Not judgments, just observations. Felt light after lunch. Had a sugar craving at 3 p.m. Walked outside and it passed. These entries became her roadmap. Patterns emerged. Triggers revealed themselves. She began to understand her body like she would understand a close friend. Not with criticism, but with compassion. Her evenings changed too. She dimmed the lights after sunset. She made dinner early. She turned off screens an hour before bed. She read books that inspired her, lit a lavender candle, and played soft music. She created an environment that whispered, "It's safe to relax now." Sleep became a sacred process, not a crash at the end of the day, but a descent into restoration. And her body responded. Deeper sleep, fewer night wakings, a steadier fasting glucose in the mornings. The numbers were nice, but what truly mattered was the peace. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the transformation deepened. People began to notice not just that she looked healthier, but that she radiated something. A calm, a confidence, a quiet joy. They asked what diet she was on, what program she followed, and she smiled because she knew it was never about the food alone. It was about rhythm. It was about choosing to live each day in alignment with healing, not just physically but emotionally, spiritually, and energetically. She had rewired her daily routine not by force but by faith. Faith in her body's ability to heal. Faith in her own capacity to change. Faith in the power of consistent, loving action. She wasn't chasing perfection. She was practicing presence. And through that practice, she discovered something most people never do. That every small choice made in love becomes a thread in the tapestry of transformation. This wasn't a protocol. This wasn't a hack. This was a way of being, a sacred return to self. She learned that her body, like the earth, responds to rhythm. Morning light, gentle movement, deep breath, nourishing food, honest rest, loving thoughts, kind rituals. She wasn't fixing a disease, she was remembering wholeness. And the most beautiful part? She knew that healing wasn't a destination. It was a daily homecoming. Each breath, each step, each bite was an invitation to come back to herself, to honor the wisdom of her biology, to repair the trust that had been lost through years of neglect, fear, and confusion. She had stopped looking for salvation in someone else's prescription and started listening to the quiet intelligence within. She healed, not because she was lucky or gifted or exceptional, but because she was willing. Willing to begin, willing to try again, willing to fall and rise, willing to rewrite the story she had been told about aging, disease, and what's possible. She discovered that the real medicine was in the rituals, not grand gestures but small, sacred acts done with consistency and care. And now when she looks in the mirror, she no longer sees a patient. She sees a healer. A woman who chose rhythm over rigidity, curiosity over control, self-respect over self-punishment. A woman who built a life where healing wasn't something she chased, it was something she lived. You can too, not by copying every step, but by listening deeply to your own body, by asking, what would it look like to live as if healing is my birthright? Then do that. Every morning, every breath, every bite. Rewire your routine not to punish, but to love. Because love is the most powerful medicine of all, she connected to a higher purpose. At first it started as a quiet longing, one she couldn't quite articulate. But it was there, unmistakably, like a soft pulse beneath the surface of everything. It wasn't just about numbers anymore. It wasn't just about reversing insulin resistance, balancing hormones, or lowering A1C. Mary began to feel that her healing journey was about something more, something larger, deeper, and far more enduring than lab results. It was about reclaiming a life that meant something, a life with meaning, with purpose, with presence. There had been a time when she measured her worth by productivity, by how much she could do, how many people she could take care of, how well she could hold it all together without falling apart. For years she had poured herself into others, children, partner, co-workers, community. And somewhere along the way, her own needs, her own voice, got pushed to the bottom of the list. She didn't resent it, but she began to understand something critical. You can't give from an empty vessel. You can't show up fully for life when your body is barely hanging on. So she asked herself a question she hadn't asked in decades. What is my life for? It shook her. Because it wasn't just about surviving anymore, it was about living. And not just living in the physical sense, but living with a spark, a reason to rise each morning, a sense that her time, her energy, her breath mattered. That she had something left to offer this world, even if she was older, even if she was healing, even if she had been through more than most would ever know. That question, what is my life for, opened a door. And what walked through that door wasn't a list of achievements or goals. It was a vision. A vision of holding her grandchild's hand as they walked to school. A vision of dancing in the kitchen while her favorite song played. A vision of waking up pain-free and hiking a trail she once thought was beyond her reach. A vision of laughing, really laughing, with the people she loved most. These weren't far-off dreams. They were visions of possibility that breathed life into her bones. Purpose doesn't shout, it whispers. And Mary learned how to listen. On the days when her energy was low, when her cravings returned, when the scale didn't budge, she leaned on that vision. I want to see my grandkids grow up. I want to travel with my partner. I want to feel free in my own skin. Those weren't just hopes. They were anchors. They gave weight to her choices. They turned daily habits into sacred acts. She began to see that healing wasn't about willpower. It was about devotion. A devotion to life. A devotion to presence. A devotion to showing up for her soul, not just her symptoms. She stopped asking, what do I need to fix today? And started asking, what would someone who loves herself do today? That one question changed everything. Mary understood something else too. Healing was never just a physical task, it was a spiritual one. And for her, that meant reconnecting with the divine, not through dogma or guilt, but through relationship. In the quiet of early morning, she opened her hands and whispered simple prayers, not begging, not bargaining, just being. Thank you for this day. Thank you for this breath. Show me how to love this body. Show me how to walk in purpose. Those prayers became a daily alignment, a way to remember she wasn't alone in this. Faith became her fuel, not because she had all the answers, but because she learned to trust the process. She began to believe that life was conspiring for her, not against her, that each setback was a redirection, not a punishment, that her body, even in its symptoms, was a sacred communicator, that healing wasn't a battle, it was a partnership, and purpose. It wasn't a grand achievement, it was intimacy with life, being present when her daughter called, watching the wind move through the trees, feeling her feet on the ground, and realizing, I am still here, I am still breathing, I still have time. Purpose showed up in the smallest moments, moments she used to rush past. Now they were the very fabric of her healing. She started volunteering once a week at a local shelter. Nothing major, just a few hours offering meals, a listening ear, a warm smile. But those hours meant something. They reminded her that her life had value beyond her diagnosis, that she wasn't broken or waiting to be fixed. She was already whole, simply unfolding. She mentored a younger woman who was also navigating chronic illness. She didn't offer advice, just presence, empathy, truth. She shared her story, her doubts, her hope. And in doing so, she discovered that her pain had become her power, that what once felt like a burden now carried the potential to bless others. There's a sacred clarity that comes from walking through suffering. It strips away the unnecessary. It reveals what's real. For Mary, that clarity revealed her higher purpose, not in spite of her healing journey, but because of it. She wasn't just healing for herself anymore. She was healing as a legacy. For her children, for the generations to come, for the strangers she may never meet, but who might one day feel less alone because of her courage. She didn't need to be famous. She didn't need a platform or a following. Her purpose was woven into the fabric of her daily life. It was in the way she greeted the mailman, in the way she nourished her body with reverence, in the way she chose peace over panic when a flare-up came, in the way she forgave herself on the hard days and kept moving forward. There were still struggles. She still had days when doubt crept in, when old habits whispered promises of comfort. But purpose pulled her forward. It was her compass, her light, her quiet knowing. This is bigger than me. This matters. I matter. And on those days, she didn't have to force anything. She just had to remember. Remember the vision, remember the prayer, remember the love that called her into this new life. She started keeping a journal, not just for symptoms but for celebrations. Every small win, every act of kindness, every moment of alignment. She documented not just the data, but the divine. A note from her grandson, a breakthrough in meditation, a meal that left her feeling vibrant, a sunset that left her breathless. Her journal became a testament to the truth. Healing is not linear, but it is holy. She began to treat her body not as a project but as a temple. She adorned it with soft clothing. She spoke to it with kindness. She touched her skin with intention. She no longer waited until she felt better to love herself. She loved herself into feeling better. Purpose gave her the patience to stay the course, to make the soup from scratch, to drink the water, to pause and breathe when stress surged. These weren't acts of discipline, they were declarations of worth. Every action said, I believe I belong here. I believe my life is worth the care I give it. She knew she might never have the perfect body. She might never be free of all symptoms. But that wasn't the point. The point was connection. To herself, to her people, to her purpose, to the sacred hum of life itself. And in that connection, she found the deepest healing of all, not just in body but in being. Eventually, others began to notice something different about Mary. Not just the glow in her skin or the lightness in her step, but something deeper. A peace, a strength, a stillness that couldn't be shaken. When they asked her what she was doing, she didn't list foods or routines. She smiled and said, I remembered why I want to live. And I started living like it mattered. Her higher purpose became her foundation. Her faith became her flow. And her healing, once something she chased with desperation, became a natural byproduct of the love she poured into each day. You see, Mary didn't just change her habits, she changed her heart. She didn't just add supplements or remove sugar. She added meaning. She removed the fear that said she couldn't change. And in doing so, she created space for grace, for joy, for miracles. And now when she walks into a room, people feel something. They can't name it, but it stirs something inside them. Because healing isn't just about what you do, it's about who you become in the process. Mary became a living example of what's possible when we live from the inside out. When we connect to a vision bigger than our pain. When we let purpose, not pressure, guide our path. Healing doesn't begin with perfection. It begins with why. Why do you want to be well? Why do you want to wake up each morning with strength? Why do you choose nourishment over numbness? When you know your why, the how will find its way. Let purpose lead you. Let faith sustain you. Let love be the reason you begin and the reason you keep going. You are not your diagnosis. You are not broken. Inside you is a healer, a warrior, a miracle waiting to rise. Mary's story is proof that it's never too late, and healing doesn't come from hope alone. It comes from action. If she can do it, so can you. Subscribe, stay inspired, and remember, your future is not written, it's chosen.